Okay, cool. All right. So, welcome to the Articles of Antiquity video version. I am your
Yeah.
host, Miss, your founder, Jen Sparkman. And today I have a lovely filmmaker on today's magazine interview. Why don't I let you introduce yourself and tell me who you are, what you do, and what's your film called?
Sure. My name is Jairo Cuevas, and I work at Pixar in the creative content department. And my short film is titled Hazard. It's a short 5-minute horror film.
Awesome. Okay. And so, question. So, Hazard is a very short film. So, what kind of inspired you to make the movie?
So I just really like horror films. I love watching scary films. I think just because um, there's a lot of stuff in the real world that scares me, but like I think like horror films at the end of the day, they're not really going to hurt you in a real way, which I really, really like. And so with Hazard, I was walking my dogs out early in the morning when there was no sun yet, and they were just kind of doing their business. They're doing their stuff on the lawn, and there was this van that kind of flashed its lights on and off at us, and it really terrified me because there was no one in the van,
Okay.
and but I couldn't run anywhere because my dogs were doing their business. I didn't want to like pull the dogs mid poo. So I kind of just like stood there. But then that was it. Like there was no one around. The car just did its thing. The dogs finished their stuff. I bagged their items. And then as I was walking back home, the idea just hit me of like, what if like you were stranded somewhere in the middle of nowhere and all you had were your hazard lights to kind of help you feel a little bit safe.
Hmm.
And then I just love urban legends, like Bloody Mary, and just every town has their own little myth. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if like I just created some sort of myth tied to the blinking lights? And with Bloody Mary, if you say her name 3 times right, I think she comes out. So I thought, well, what if you say someone's name to the lights 3 times, they come out, and then I just kind of fabricated this idea of this villain in the past who did some awful things and then hung himself. And so, what if he tries to hang you if you call him out of his, I don't know, slumber? And that's sort of how the idea came about. Just walking my dogs early morning one night, being terrified of these lights flashing me, and then just kind of letting my imagination kind of go from there.
That's awesome. It's a really creative idea, and very similar to and relatable to a lot of, like you said, urban folklore and different things like that. So, one of the questions that I didn't write you, but
Oh,
is
surprise
come to
question.
mind that I meant to ask you about was the cinematography. Now you shot that. It's such a dark film in terms of there's no lighting. How did you pull that off without getting it terrible looking and like in
Well,
terms of like lighting, like everything's so clear, nothing is fuzzy. Like what did you do to make it look that good for cinema quality?
So most of the time, I've had to shoot my own short films, and my friend Marlon Torres, who actually ended up shooting Hazard, he had some free time, and he was like, "Hey, I'll shoot this one for you," which I thought was great. And he has his truck full of equipment, like he freelances, so he has a bunch of equipment, and we shot it on a red camera, which is a very nice camera.
That makes so
Um,
much sense.
yeah, and so I don't remember the intensity of the lights he used, but he only used like 1 or 2 lights. And they were pretty powerful lights, but he could dim them and he can change the color on them as well. So he had a lot of flexibility with that. And he used these, I think he stuck the prime lenses.
Hmm.
So they take in a lot of light. So even if you're shooting in a low lit scenario, those lenses can shoot in a very low lit kind of area and still get a lot of like detail on people's faces, and the car and whatnot. So he used minimal lighting, used a red camera, used some powerful lenses, and that's all it takes. I'm sure you could do it in other ways, but we were very fortunate enough to have Marlon use his red camera to really make it very spooky, because that was one of my fears, was like, will this camera or any camera be able to get enough detail where you want it to be scary but you still want to see Joanna's reactions to what's going on. And so he was able to really light it in a way where you get a lot of detail, but it didn't like expose a lot of the background. Because back to the inspiration of like when I was walking my dogs out, like it was very dark except for like the pools of street lights that kind of hit the road. But other than that, beyond the pool of lighting, there's darkness. And so I always wanted that for the movie, was to have just that the car lights or the interior car light kind of give her enough detail for us to see her, but then not be able to see beyond outside of the car to kind of keep that creepy vibe. Um, I don't know if that works. I don't know if it makes it creepy. I'm sure some people want to be able to see more of what's going on outside. But for me, like I said, I was really thinking about how I was scared to be outside, was just minimal amounts of light and then nothing else beyond the street lights. And I kind of wanted to incorporate that feeling. And Martin was able to really bring that to the movie very, very well.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I That's one of the things that when I got done watching it, I was like, wow, that was so clear, like super professional quality. I think there's a level of these days everyone feels like they can be a filmmaker and they can make movies and everything, but like if you don't have the right equipment, it's still gonna look super amateurish and not good. So I just thought that commend you. Like that was like great that you pulled that off. Like you could, throw it in a film festival and not feel awkward. Like, oh, I hope they do accept my low lighting for my,
Yeah.
dark scenes, which is
Well,
literally the whole movie.
and like I said, I've shot most of my shorts. I feel like the movie would have looked completely different if I had shot it compared to Martin, because I don't have the same amount of equipment that he does, right? So like every person who shoots through a camera probably has their own style and their own unique way of looking at the world. And there is something to say about a movie that maybe just uses a camera phone, right? And you're like, well, it looks crappy, but if the story ties in with the way it's shot, then maybe that's fine, right? But I feel like there's no way it could look quote unquote crappy and get away with it unless we wrote it and told it in a way that incorporated that technology to make it look kind of like homemade or something.
Yeah,
But since
sure.
we didn't want to have that homemade feeling, I'm really glad that Marlon was able to offer up his camera and to shoot it himself, because I feel like he has such a great eye for a lot of things. And I had the shot list of very few angles, but then he would walk around the car and be like, "What about this angle? Or what about that angle?" And what's great about having someone who will shoot your stuff is that they have the time to go and look around at stuff, as opposed to like if I would have shot it, I probably would have just picked out a few angles and that's it, because I also need to go talk to the actors or talk to the sound person or double check the script. But when you have at least your cinematographer who's not you doing their own thing, they have the time to go and walk around the car, and for this example, while I'm doing some other stuff. And so he would just really pick out certain angles and show me through the camera and be like, "That's great, let's do that." And so that was a lot of fun when people are just excited to just keep adding to to anything. Then you have to be careful not to do too much, right? Because you also have to like, I also produced it, so I have to be aware of the time. Like we can't do too much, or else then we're overstaying our welcome.
Sure. So sound was also sort of a really wonderful collaboration between you and the sound designer and composers. What was the process like in putting all of the suspense and the feeling together for the film?
Yeah, good question. So my friend Colton Becker recorded the sound when we were shooting on set. And he was great. He does a lot of freelance work. He knows his sound work. He's also a great cinematographer. But for this one, he did a lot of the sound work in terms of being on the field. And I was always kind of like, uh, sound is always such a crucial thing. We were discussing about your documentary and stuff, right? Like I feel like sometimes people don't quite understand how important sound is unless they hear how crappy it is, right? Like if it sounds great and there's no technical flaw, you're sitting there watching the movie and you're like, "Oh, that was great." But once like you hear something that sounds off, you're like, "Wait, what is going on? This movie's horrible. Like the sound is way off." No matter how wonderful something looks, I think like people immediately, like if they can't sit there and be comfortable hearing something the way they normally hear sounds, and like it really throws them off. Um, which I have done many times. I've learned my lessons. But Adrian Morari and Samantha Benedetti, who also work at Pixar, they're the ones who helped with the sound, and they were really really great. I Once we edited the movie together, we had a meeting with them, and I just kind of sat with them and talked about like what I was thinking for the movie. And we wanted it to be loud but yet quiet at the same time. And it's probably weird for a sound person to hear that, right? Like sounds really hard because it can also be very subjective. Like what I find
Sure.
scary as a sound, you might find really calm and soothing.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I know there's like there's typical scary sounds. I think we can all also identify as scary or as happy or as romantic. Um, and so with Hazard, um, I really, first of all, I really wanted it to sound really, really dead. When we were shooting Hazard, there was crickets everywhere. Like so many cricket sounds. And I was like, oh my God, like how are we gonna get rid of these crickets? And Adrian and Sam, they showed me their first pass. They're like, oh yeah, we got rid of the cricket sounds. It's fine. I'm like, how did you do that? And I don't even know how I'm not even gonna try to explain how they did it, but they did it. And so they got rid of the cricket sounds because I wanted to be as quiet as possible.
That's
Um,
amazing.
but I also wanted her to come in clear, and there was no problems there. We got really great audio with her. But then with the composers, which is Mujan Yousefi and Sylvan Carton, I've worked with them many, many times, so they kind of understand sort of what I like already. We've done comedies and dramas and horror stuff. So, but again, I think music is also another thing that's hard. Like, make it scary. Okay, well, what's a scary music sound like? Again, if you think something is scary, I might think it's really funny and hilarious. Um, but I pretty much just told them to match the emotion of what Joanna's going through throughout the movie, where at first she's just really upset and pissed off that her car is not working. But at the same time, we still need to introduce that this is a horror movie, and so the music is just kind of slowly kind of creeping in, and then sort of by the end when it gets really crazy and she comes down and hangs to really make it loud and boisterous. And I really wanted to make sure that when she comes down, like we really got like a good like crunch sound on her neck. So like with Adrian and Samantha, I was like every time they would like play the crunch sound for me, I'm like make it louder, like just keep push it until like it really really sounds either too fake or if we're peaking the sound right and it just starts to sound distorted. So they were constantly like trying to find that sweet spot of like really really loud but not loud enough that it's breaking um, the sound and making it distorted. But I just really thought like she goes out of frame, right? And you're like, what's happening? The music's kind of there. Then there's like you hear her screaming, and then for her to calm down, I just wanted it to be sound wise very very jarring, and to also get the point across that she is dead. And so like the louder and crunchier that next sound, I felt like the more we got to point across to people that, oh yeah, she's dead, and also oh just like a scare factor of like, oh whoa, she dropped out of nowhere and she's dead. Great, creepy. And that was the intent in anyways.
No, no, that's great. I'm so glad. That's a really great answer on how you kind of came to be of why the sound became the way it is. Because, I mean, sound I feel is almost more important than picture. That even if there's nothing you can see, you can tell the environment and the mood and the instruments, behind it and the soundtrack. And so I think that was another thing that really stood out to me was the sound. So good job there. And then let's
Like,
see.
sound healing.
So why not make the film a little bit longer? Like, because I was so invested and then it was over. And so I was just curious, like, what was that? Like, did you just, do you want to and make this bigger or do you want to enlarge it? Do you just want to make this little short thing and then be done with it? Or like, so where are you with this one?
I'm so lazy. Um, so right now we're in post production for a feature film that I directed that Chelsea just finished picture locking, and it's getting sound work and color
Oh,
correction.
that's
Or
exciting.
prepping it. We're prepping it for color. But when we shot Hazard, what year is this? 20, 2020, right?
Yeah.
2019. We shot it in 2018. So in 2018, I was while Chelsea was editing the feature, I was bored out of my mind because like I had because I shot the feature, I wrote it, directed, did all this thing, but now it was in her hands. So while I was waiting for her to just send me scenes for me to give notes and feedback on the feature, I started just writing this. I really just started writing things down of just anything. Um, and when I started walking my dogs and got the idea, I thought, well, this would be cool to just do something really short and fast while I'm waiting to get more scenes from the feature to help Chelsea out with edits and give her notes. Um, and so really, it's just a really short idea because it was in between me waiting around to work on the feature. And I didn't want it to go too long because I don't want it to take my time away from working on the feature, which we're still doing. It's in post production, um, but I just really wanted to be something really really short to occupy my mind because I was going stir crazy, and I really hadn't done a short horror since like 2 or 3 years prior. So I was just ready to do something different because the feature is more of a comedy drama. That I wanted to just do something completely not comedy or drama. So I wanted to just be 5 minutes, something fast that we can do. That being said, it still took a long time to make. Like I had to write it, which took about a month. I had to try to find that car, which took a very long time to find that car because I don't own that car. I ended up going to like a car show, and asking people if I can use their cars, and eventually someone said yes. Margaret build the legs, so that took a while. So even though it was a short, it still took a long time. And what I thought was going to be like a quick and easy thing actually ended up taking a year because
Wow.
because when we finished shooting it of 2018, we thought, okay, we have a month to try to finish it to post it for Halloween. And then we realized that's not going to work. We have to wait. We have to give ourselves a whole year for Chelsea to edit and for sound to work and for music to get done for us to finally set it out to the world to see. And so that's why we gave it ourselves a whole year to work on it. But since I had pretty much already done my part, it was really up to Chelsea, Adrian, Sam, Mujan and Sylvan, who did the music and the sound, Mark DiNicola color corrected it, who also works at Pixar. Once post production happens, like it's really kind of off my shoulders and on to them, and I'm just like watching what they do or hearing what they give me and writing down notes or having meetings and talking to them about it. So imagine if I had done a longer version of that movie. It would have taken up even more of my time. We probably wouldn't be having this discussion. We probably would still be working on it. And horror films in general, like, there's prosthetics, there's makeup, depending on the level of gore, that takes time. It's not easy to do a lot of takes when you're getting someone bloody over and over again, right? Like it's one thing to do a comedy and do like 5 or 6 takes where someone is just saying something funny. It's another thing to do like 5 or 6 takes and then have to keep squirting someone with blood, but that takes time. You have to clean them off, then you have to reset their hair or whatever, then do it again. Maybe you have a bunch of cameras, so you don't have to do so many takes. You can have like 3 takes done in one if you have 3 cameras. So I have ideas for how to make it longer. I would definitely like, if I ever get the chance to make Hazard one like a 90-minute movie, it would probably be called like The Hangman, and it would probably be about a couple of teenagers late at night, trying to figure out how to destroy this villain. And one thing that I didn't get to do in my script that I really really wanted to was, I feel like I'm Hispanic, I'm Mexican, so I've kind of grown up was always kind of being aware of my surroundings a little bit. And there's racial tensions in certain parts of the world for sure. And sometimes I'd like to comment on that if I can. And if I were to ever make a feature to Hazard, I would make it so that the ghost had a certain thing for people who were of color. And what would that be, to be attacked by a ghost who has more vengeance towards someone who maybe looks like me as opposed to someone who doesn't look like me. So there are things that I wanted to do in the short that I just couldn't because it's just too much to do in a short film. But if you do it in a feature film, I would love to tackle just issues about society and race, gender, but also still try to make it as fun as you can, because horror films are meant to be really, really fun with like little ideas of how you see society. So I know it's a long-winded answer. I would love to make Hazard a long feature film if I could, but I also work 45-hour days or 45-hour weeks, at work. So like I have to juggle that as well. And, I'm married. I want to make sure I make time for my wife, and all that stuff. So it's something I never really thought about in film school of like, I just want to make movies all the time. But as I've gotten older, there's more responsibilities that I have to just be in charge of. And so as I've gotten older, like I've just had to do other things in my life that kind of like, all right, now how do I fit this into my circle of life? Sorry, I went on a rant there. But yeah, I mainly made it short because I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, so I could focus on other parts of my life.
No, that makes sense. Well, it's definitely a great short, and hopefully eventually you make a longer version of it, or even like a short story, or like you write read a novella of it or something. Like, you never know. It could get published, and then more people could be more fans of it. And by the time
Yeah.
you do a film, it'll already have like a following. So,
Yeah, and
um,
I'm glad to hear that you wanted more. That's a good, nice feeling of like, oh, I just started, now it's over. Like, what's gonna happen next? Or it could
yeah.
also be just really crappy writing. I'm like, well, convenient, just ends like that. Just stop the
Well, I
writing.
mean, I could see that there was so much potential there for it to be longer. And as someone who's a writer director like you, I totally can relate to, oh well, I only have enough to make this, so I'm just gonna make this, and then eventually I'll come back to it. So,
Yeah.
um,
There's also like money, right? Like, there's only so much money you can put into a project.
yes,
You
for
know, I
sure.
mean, kind
No,
of you want to do other
absolutely.
stuff and put money into that.
Okay, so I think that kind of covers for our questions for the film, but I always ask a few fun questions
Yes.
in our interviews. So if you could, because I usually say if you're a student on an island, what 5 things would you take? But I feel like all of us right now globally, as of March 30th, 2020, we are all stuck in our houses. So we all
Yeah.
have the 5 things that we would want to have, hopefully. So
Yeah.
the
Just
question
stay alive.
that we would actually want to ask you is, if you could have lunch with anyone in the world living today, who would it be? Because that typical film question, if you could grab lunch with that one person, that would be like the person to have lunch with. Who would that be for you?
Yeah, for me, it would be Sam Raimi. I would love to meet Sam Raimi. He's kind of the reason I think he's one of the reasons why I love horror films so much. Like, I mean, Carrie is probably the first horror film that I saw when I was too young. My parents shouldn't have let me see that movie. But then as I like went into like middle school and high school, I was introduced to like the Evil Dead films.
Mhm.
Um, and I really love those movies, and that's when I started to see, oh, you can infuse horror and humor together, because those films are I feel like are genuinely scary. But then Bruce Campbell, who plays Ash, he's such a funny character, and he's in these situations where like they're horrific, but yet he does these funny acting choices that just make me laugh all the time. And then it's also kind of, I mean, have you seen? I'm sure are you familiar with the Evil Dead films?
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. Like, he cuts off his own hand and he puts a chainsaw on it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's so far
It's
fetched.
ridiculous.
It's such a
Yeah.
crazy movie, and I've always wanted to be able to sit down and talk with Sam Raimi and like talk about like there's books and Bruce Campbell's talked about in some of his books, but it'd be fun to just meet Sam Raimi and just be like, well, talk to me about your life, about horror, and where do you see it going, and what are some of your favorite horror films, um, and also just be able just to get his idea on just life in general. He just seems like such a cool dude. He went off to direct some of the Spider-Man films.
Right.
I love his Spider-Man movies so much. And he's done other horror films and drama films as well. So he's done like a full range of films. So it would be cool to just kind of sit with the dude and just talk to him about filmmaking.
I think that's one of the fun things about living in California is that, you do accidentally have these like opportunities just to randomly run into people that you wouldn't necessarily meet. Like I don't live in California anymore, but um, I didn't, I always had to remind myself that it is not a given that this much creativity is around you,
Hmm.
and that you're blessed to be in a community of artists who care, that are passionate like you and have lives, and are doing other things. And it's a gift, that because when you go to other places, people are like, oh wow, you did this or you worked on that, and it's like, it feels like a magic world for them. Like this, everyone else
Yeah,
is like, well, this world that doesn't exist where I live, but when I go visit this place called California, this is where movies are. And I don't know, it's like for you and I, that's like just a normal everyday thing, like that we'll walk across the street and we'll see, I mean, for example, I had one of the Pixar director's kids like
mhm.
went to my school. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, and and it was just like a thing that like Savannah College of Art and Design would have one of the Pixar's students, like founders, basically. John Lasseter's kid went to our school. So it's like, oh, no big deal. John Lasseter's coming to like do a commencement speech because his kid wanted to learn, animation from
Yeah.
a really good animation program, and then he's probably going to end up working at, I'm sure if you don't know him yet, I'm sure he'll end up being there at some point, or so
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's
Pixar is so
very
many people. So
Pixar does have a lot of people for sure. Yeah, yeah. There's like 1,400. Although we're all working from home right now.
I know, that's crazy. That's crazy that you guys are all working from home anyway. So, um,
It's kind of it's so it's intense in a way because I've it reminds me of just how smart people are at
yeah.
Pixar. Because like I always thought I could never edit from home, because I work in the creative content department, which we shoot so much, we film so much, like our drives are just full of like I think like one of our projects right now is over 22 terabytes of
Wow.
footage.
Mhm.
But the way they've been able to make it so that I could actually be in my home office and just edit off the Avid is just it's amazing that I'm able to do that.
Are
Um,
you able to like remote log into your computer at work?
yeah, and then just edit away. And as long as your internet is fast enough, like it's fine. And though they reimburse you for certain things, which is great. I think all companies are right now are like doing this thing where they'll reimburse you for whatever equipment you need.
Oh,
But
cool.
to be able to just be able to just wake up, roll out of bed, and just come into my home office and just like start editing or logging or whatever it is they need. Like it's been really great. I love going to the campus, but it's also kind of been nice to refamiliarize myself with just my home, and give more time for family. I think we're all trying to find like the positive side of being able to stay at home, and I know it's really crazy out there right now. So we're all just trying to stick to stick to
Well,
the
and
good things.
you live in a state where it's truly dangerous to really be
Yeah,
anywhere in public. So like I kind of live in the country. So like there's rolling hills. Like I honestly going to like one of the downtown cities near me, like even before there was a pandemic, nobody was there. Like no one was walking around. It was
yeah,
basically like pick a park where you live, but like what 2 a.m. looks like to you is like 10 in the afternoon or 3 in the afternoon for me. Like no one's
yeah.
there except just
Wow.
casually just walking around, whatever. So it's like, it's so weird. It went from like barely seeing people to no one existing. So it's crazy, but everyone's lawn has been mowed and we're all
Yeah.
growing gardens here, in unlike in places like the concrete jungle where you guys don't have backyards unless you have
Right.
houses.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Everyone's like talking to each other like this virtually. But
yes.
we're making it work, right? We're making it work.
Yes. And then my last question is, if you could travel in time to shoot one scene, where would you go and what would the scene look like? So what would you go and where would you go?
So yeah, this one I actually did kind of like look up. I was looking up like historical facts of like there's so many things that go on in the world, but one thing that I came across, which I thought was hilarious, was about Napoleon Bonaparte, and apparently like he and a bunch of his troops one time wanted to hunt rabbits. So like someone gathered a bunch of rabbits. I think the number varies wherever you end up googling the story. Some will say it was like rabbits in the thousands, and some will say hundreds. But I guess what ended up happening was once they released the rabbits, they actually ended up attacking like Napoleon and all his soldiers or the people who were there hunting the rabbits. And so I just thought it'd be hilarious to just have like a wide establishing shot of someone releasing the rabbits and like for a minute they're gonna be like, oh, this is gonna be so easy, and then all of a sudden like, oh no, so many rabbits. But I guess what ended up happening was like they got into their carriages and then just like stormed off. But I just thought it'd be hilarious to have like a wide shot just seeing all these rabbits just like attack people, even though we're so used to rabbits and bunnies just being nice and friendly. But I think that the reason the rabbits attacked were because I guess they were used to someone feeding them, and so I think they thought that these people were going to feed them, and so that's why they rushed towards them.
Oh my goodness. I was not expecting you to say that. That is hilarious. I think you
Yeah.
have the best answer for a
Oh well.
travel question. Like
You
everyone
should
always,
Google it. There's more to it. I just got like the little
it
tidbits
sounds
of
like
it.
a
But it's like
podcast episode or something for one of those
yeah,
history podcasts. You should
the
like
history
send them
podcast.
a blurb or something, like one of the people, and like stuff you missed in history class. That would probably be a good one for them. Like, oh, shoot them an
Yeah,
email saying, "Hey, you need to look at these crazy buddies attacking
yeah.
Napoleon."
But there's so much you can learn, right? Like I'm there's so much out there. I'm so glad for the internet now because there's so many things that are out there that you didn't get to learn in history class, right? Because time was so limited that you can go
Yeah,
out and like learn so much more,
exactly.
which is great. But it's great that at least classes kind of funnel it in a way to give you some important highlights. Then you can go on your own and find more stuff, whether it be
Exactly.
hilarious or dramatic. There's more stuff out there for sure to learn about.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the magazine. It's been wonderful getting to talk to you uh, today.
Oh yeah, well thanks for having me. You said I'm your first Zoom interview. Most of the
Well,
time
yeah,
it's
because
been written?
I typically don't have I typically don't have video chats, so it's pretty great. So we're gonna stop recording and
Stop. It's gonna get real right now. Stop recording.
okay, thanks.